to keep ordinary. Dressed in a plain charcoal hoodie and black joggers, Selena blended in with the crowd. No service medals, no stars on her shoulders, just a woman with a quiet agenda. Find a solid pair of running shoes, maybe indulge in a green smoothie, and forget, if only for an hour, the weight of 23 years in uniform. At 44, Selena carried herself like a quiet storm, still but commanding. Her hair, short and peppered with silver, framed a face that had witnessed more than her calm demeanor ever let on. From Afghanistan to Syria, she'd negotiated peace with tribal warlords, commanded troops under sniper fire, and walked mine-laced valleys with steel in her spine. Yet today she hesitated only for a sale sign. It was this contrast, grace under simplicity, that drew looks. Not curiosity. Not admiration. Something else. Subtle, but sharp. The kind of glance that sizes someone up and finds them misplaced. She noticed it first outside the Foot Pro Elite store. A mother with a stroller gave a side glance that was too long. A young man stepped aside but looked back, frowning. Selena knew the feeling, the quiet hum of being watched, not with interest, but with calculation. Still, she brushed it off. She'd stared down men with rifles and worse intentions. A few stares in a shopping mall. Harmless. Or so she thought. Inside the store, she moved with precision, examining treads, testing arch support. The young cashier at the counter smiled nervously as she approached, like he wasn't sure whether to offer help or call someone else. Selena didn't flinch. She handed over her card, offered a quiet thank you, and waited as the machine processed. Transaction complete. Bag in hand. Mission accomplished. But just as she stepped out into the corridor, just as the scent of cinnamon pretzels and perfume returned to the air, a presence blocked her path. He wasn't in uniform, jeans, white shirt. But the badge clipped to his belt caught the light. So did the holstered weapon. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, voice dry as chalk. "I need to ask you a few questions." Selena blinked, calm, focused. Then tilted her head, her voice quiet but firm. "Is there a problem, officer?" And just like that, the illusion of an ordinary Saturday shattered. Officer Bradley Monroe wasn't supposed to be working that day. It was his weekend off, and like most off-duty cops in Maplewood, he kept things casual. Fitted jeans, white t-shirt, Oakley sunglasses perched above a brow that rarely relaxed. But there were two things he never left behind: his Glock 19 and the silver badge clipped to his belt, always visible, always ready, as if reminding the world and himself that even without a uniform, he still had power. At 38, Monroe had carved out a reputation inside the department and beyond. Not the kind that made headlines, at least not officially. Internal Affairs had seen his name more than once, always in connection with civilian complaints, excessive force, unjustified stops, aggressive tone toward Black and Latino residents. But those files, closed, dismissed, lack of evidence. Or worse, resolved internally. The whispers around the precinct painted a clearer picture. Monroe was one of those, but as long as he got the job done, no one was rushing to pull his badge. That morning, he had wandered into Maplewood Galleria looking for nothing in particular. Maybe a pair of shades. Maybe just the comfort of being in a place where he felt in control. He didn't expect his day to change, not until he saw her. She stood near the back of Foot Pro Elite, fingers testing the soles of a black and neon pair of trainers. Black woman, athletic build. Confident stance, alone. Something about her didn't sit right with him. She didn't look nervous. She didn't look grateful to be there. She looked like she belonged. And to Officer Monroe, that was suspicious in itself. His mind moved fast, not on logic, but on reflex and bias, sharpened by years of patrolling neighborhoods where skin color equaled threat. He didn't know who she was. Didn't care. His gut told him she didn't fit. Is she casing the place? Fake credit card? One of those identity scam types? The mental Rolodex spun quickly, each scenario more accusatory than the last. He stopped near a kiosk, pretending to check his phone, but his eyes stayed locked on her. She was moving toward the register now. Calm. Composed, like she had nothing to hide. That alone irritated him. The cashier handed her the bag. She nodded politely, stepped out of the store, and Monroe moved in, cutting across the tiled floor with quiet precision. This wasn't about protocol. There'd been no call, no complaint, no reported theft. This was about presence, and his discomfort with hers. She didn't belong in his version of this mall, and he had the badge and the gun to prove it. The corridors of Maplewood Galleria were designed to soothe. Wide walkways, polished floors, soft overhead lighting that made every storefront gleam like an invitation. But for Officer Bradley Monroe, they were also mirrors, reflecting back a version of the world that made sense to him. Order, predictability, control. And when something, or something, didn't fit that picture, his instincts kicked in. Not police instincts. Something deeper. Something darker. Conditioned. He watched as the woman exited Foot Pro Elite with a shoebox tucked neatly into a branded bag. She walked with unhurried grace, neither flaunting her purchase nor looking over her shoulder. She didn't rush. She didn't fumble. She didn't scan for security cameras. That, in itself, raised a red flag in Monroe's mind. Too calm. Too confident. Too entitled. He began to follow her, not closely, not overtly, but with the calculated subtlety of a man used to being both predator and judge. His phone was out, thumb lazily scrolling across a blank screen, but his eyes never left her. Every move she made, how she adjusted her sleeve, how she held the receipt, how she glanced at the juice bar ahead, he cataloged with suspicion, not curiosity. And when she finally exited the store's threshold and stepped into the main walkway, he struck. "Excuse me, ma'am," Monroe said, positioning himself directly in her path. His tone was civil, but taut, like a trap that hadn't yet sprung. Selena stopped, shoulders relaxed, but her eyes sharpened instantly. Military training had hardwired her to read energy faster than words. And this man's energy? Cold. Intentional, not curious, not courteous. Confrontational. "Can I help you, officer?" she asked calmly, her voice carrying no hint of fear, only restrained surprise. "You seemed suspicious back there," Monroe said, gesturing vaguely toward the store behind them. "Mind telling me what you were doing?" Selena blinked. Once. Slowly. Then held up the bag. "Buying shoes. Is that a crime now?" Monroe's gaze flicked to the bag, then back to her face. "May I see your ID?" "Why?" It wasn't defiance. It was a question soaked in principle. She knew her rights. And she wasn't about to give them up on the strength of someone else's unease. "I'm asking you politely," he replied, but the tightening of his jaw betrayed irritation. "And I'm answering you legally," she said. "If I'm not being detained, I'll be on my way." But Monroe wasn't done. Not yet. His hand, subtle but deliberate, rested on the grip of his holstered weapon. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he warned. Selena didn't flinch, but something in her chest shifted. Not fear, not yet, but a deep, familiar exhaustion. She had worn a uniform longer than this man had likely held a badge. But here she was, in her own country, on her own time, being interrogated without cause. Again. The conflict wasn't loud yet. But it had begun, and the badge was no longer a symbol of protection. It was a threat, cloaked in authority. There was a stillness in the air, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that settles before a storm. The kind that makes shoppers instinctively hush, heads turn, and movements slow. A subtle shift in energy that every seasoned soldier, every person of color in America, learns to feel before it's visible. Major General Celina Brooks stood just outside the Foot Pro Elite store, her shopping bag in one hand, her dignity in the other. Officer Bradley Monroe, still in civilian clothes but with a badge clipped to his belt and a firearm holstered at his hip, took one step closer. His presence was now unmistakable. So was his intent. "I asked to see your ID," he repeated, slower this time, not for clarity, but for control. Selena didn't move. Her posture remained open, relaxed even, but her eyes had narrowed, scanning him like a battlefield variable. She knew this terrain well, though it bore no landmines, no mortars, just a man with a badge who thought that was enough. "Officer," she said, with calm that could silence a boardroom, "I've done nothing wrong." Her voice didn't waver. It didn't need to. It carried the weight of command, of someone who had stared down insurgents in Kabul and Somali pirates in the Gulf. Yet here she was, called into question for existing with too much confidence in the wrong zip code. "Then you shouldn't have a problem showing your ID," Monroe pressed. "No," she said, "I shouldn't have a problem." "But you seem to have, with me." That struck a nerve. Monroe's jaw twitched. His thumb brushed against the safety clip of his holster, a movement she noticed immediately. Her heart rate ticked up, but she didn't let it show. Years of military drills had trained her to read a man's body language before he knew what his muscles would do. A mother pushing a stroller slowed to a stop. A young couple paused, uncertain. A security guard by the food court stiffened, unsure whether to intervene or observe. The scene was shifting. Not just tension. Attention. "Ma'am, I'm not going to ask again," Monroe said. "This is a safety concern." Selena took a breath, deep, controlled. "A safety concern," she echoed. "Because I bought shoes? Because you're not cooperating." She dropped her hand to her side, letting the shopping bag swing slightly. Her stance didn't change, but her words cut through the illusion of Monroe's authority. "I will not be treated like a criminal just because I'm shopping," she said, her voice steady, not raised. "And certainly not because I make you uncomfortable." For a moment, Monroe faltered. Something about her calm unnerved him more than yelling ever could. She wasn't defiant in the way he expected. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't panicked. She was composed, and that was power he couldn't control. The silence cracked, not with sound, but with intent. Monroe's fingers curled tightly around the grip of his pistol. One motion, swift and practiced, brought it from holster to hip, barrel pointed squarely at Selena's chest. A collective gasp swept across the mall corridor, stifled but unmistakable. Nearby, shoppers froze mid-step. Mothers pulled children close. Phone screens flickered on like fireflies in the shadows, capturing everything. "Get on the ground!" Monroe barked. "Now!" His voice no longer held the pretense of procedure. It was sharp, unrestrained, not rooted in justice, but in fear. Or worse, entitlement. Major General Celina Brooks did not move. She did not raise her hands. She did not beg. She simply straightened her spine, just slightly, and looked him in the eye. "Officer," she said, her tone clear as steel. "I am Major General Celina Brooks of the United States Army." There was no performance in her voice. No shouting, no trembling bravado, just a fact. Delivered like an order too high-ranking to question. "If you have any sense left," she continued, "you will lower your weapon, immediately." A beat passed. Then another. The gun stayed up, but Monroe's arm trembled ever so slightly. His eyes flicked across her face, searching for a lie, a tell, a crack in her composure that would justify what he had just done. But there was nothing there, just calm and command. "General," he scoffed, "don't joke with me." His voice faltered halfway through the sentence. Not much, but enough. Because Selena didn't flinch, she didn't look away, and no one held their ground like that unless they had spent their life learning how. He suddenly realized she wasn't bluffing. She wasn't trying to escape. She was giving him a chance to do the right thing, one last chance. Behind them, murmurs began to stir. A young man in a hoodie stepped forward, phone camera raised, already recording. "She just said she's a general, man," the teen said. "You're pointing a gun at a war hero." Monroe's face flushed. The crowd, once the background, was now a witness. "Stay out of this," he growled. But the damage was done. More phones came up, eyes locked on the scene. The hunter had become the spectacle, and still, Selena didn't move. "Officer Monroe," she said quietly, reading the name etched into the badge now glinting in the light. "You are about to make the most public mistake of your entire career." His hands tightened on the weapon. But for the first time, the doubt wasn't in her. It was in him. This wasn't a confrontation anymore. It was a reckoning. And with every passing second, it became harder for Monroe to tell who the crowd was afraid of, the woman holding a shopping bag or the man holding a gun. It started with one voice. "She's a hero." "You're pointing a gun at a general." The words cut through the heavy air like a lightning crack. Not shouted in panic, but declared with the urgency of someone who knew what injustice looked like and refused to be quiet. The speaker was a young white man, barely in his 20s, his hoodie pulled low and phone held high, already filming. His voice, though steady, trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of realizing what he was seeing. Officer Monroe turned sharply toward him, eyes narrowing. "Back off. This doesn't concern you." But it did now. It concerned everyone. Around them, the quiet hum of the mall shifted into something more pointed, more present. One by one, shoppers began to stop. Some out of curiosity, others out of instinct. But when the words gun and general echoed together in that space, phones came out. Screens lit up. Recording lights blinked red. Selena didn't move. She didn't need to. Her poise, unshaken, deliberate, was louder than any voice in the building. "Officer Monroe," she said, her eyes locked on his, calm but unflinching. "If you don't put that weapon away, you're going to destroy your career." Right here, in front of all of them. She nodded slightly, not toward the crowd, but to the rising wall of witnesses that now surrounded them. Ordinary people. Different ages, different races, no longer just shoppers, they were becoming a jury. Monroe's grip faltered, just for a breath. The barrel of the gun dipped ever so slightly. His expression shifted from authority to alarm. He hadn't expected this. He had expected silence, submission, maybe even fear, but not resistance laced with clarity, and certainly not a crowd willing to side against a badge. "Do you even know who you're pointing that at?" someone shouted from near the pretzel stand. "Put the damn gun away," another added. The tide was turning, not with rage, but with conscience. Monroe looked around and saw what Selena had already understood. He was no longer in control of this scene. He wasn't defending anyone. He wasn't restoring peace. He was standing in the middle of a mall, gun drawn on an unarmed black woman who just happened to outrank nearly every officer in the state and being watched by 20 phones, each one a future headline. The authority had shifted, not to Selena, not to the crowd, but to the truth and the clarity that comes when a community refuses to look away. "Your choice, officer," Selena said quietly, but it landed like a verdict. Right now, the whole country is watching, even if they don't know it yet. The tension didn't dissipate. It shifted from one man's grip to the eyes of the many. Officer Monroe stood frozen, the weight of his gun now matched by the weight of 100 phone cameras, every lens trained on him like a jury waiting to deliver a sentence. His authority, once unquestioned, now hung by a thread, and that thread was fraying fast. From across the food court, a sudden flurry of movement broke through the standoff. Mall security, 2 guards in gray polos and earpieces, pushed through the crowd, their faces taut with confusion and urgency. Close behind them came a woman in dark navy slacks and a crisp white blouse, moving with the kind of purpose that turned heads before she even spoke. She was Captain Nadine Clark, a senior officer with the Maplewood Police Department. Her boots struck the tile in clean, deliberate beats. Black, composed, commanding. A woman who had earned her position not through favors, but through grit and fortitude, and the scars of being second-guessed too many times before. And as soon as her eyes landed on Selena, the entire mood shifted. "General Brooks?" Nadine's voice broke through the static air, stunned but steady. "What's going on here?" Selena didn't turn. Her eyes were still locked on Monroe's trembling hand. But the faintest nod acknowledged the familiar voice. The word "general" dropped into the crowd like a thunderclap. A ripple passed through the watchers, gasps, murmurs, disbelief. Some of the phones lowered slightly, others zoomed in. She hadn't been bluffing. Monroe flinched. His body tensed as if some part of him still wanted to assert control, but it was too late. Nadine stepped forward, her hand already raised. "Officer Monroe," she said, voice firm enough to split stone. "Put your weapon down." "Now." He hesitated. For half a second, ego and fear wrestled behind his eyes, but Nadine's gaze didn't budge. And neither did the crowd. "Now, officer!" she snapped. Reluctantly, Monroe's hand moved. The gun dipped, then slowly, grudgingly, lowered to his side. The moment the barrel dropped, the air shifted again. Tension gave way to exhale. Not relief, not yet, but something like the beginning of accountability. Nadine turned to Selena and extended a hand. Not to help, but in respect. "General, are you all right?" Selena nodded. Her voice was still level, but it carried the depth of someone who'd stood in more battles than anyone in that mall could imagine. "I'm fine," she said, "but this is not." Nadine turned back to Monroe. "You will wait here. You do not speak to her. You do not move. You are now part of an internal investigation, and trust me, officer, this time, no one's sweeping it under the rug." Monroe opened his mouth, then shut it. There was nothing left to say. The badge on his hip had just shrunk in the eyes of everyone watching. Justice hadn't arrived wearing a cape. It came in the form of a black woman with a spine, standing next to another who refused to bow. It took less than 12 hours. The clip, fuzzy at first, filmed in portrait mode with shaky hands and whispered gasps, hit the internet like a match to dry grass. On TikTok, it was stitched with outrage. On Instagram, it was reposted by activists, veterans, and influencers alike. Twitter caught fire by midnight. By morning, March Justice Forcelina was trending across the country. The video was simple. A black woman, calm and unarmed, confronted by a white officer with his weapon drawn. Then came the words that shattered the illusion of authority. "I am Major General Celina Brooks, United States Army." That line replayed like a drumbeat under every repost, and in every comment section, one question echoed louder than the rest. If that can happen to a general, what happens to everyone else? News outlets picked up the story within hours. The footage ran on every major network: ABC, NBC, CNN. Panel discussions were scheduled before dawn, and by Monday, Officer Bradley Monroe's name was plastered across headlines nationwide. Then came the unraveling. Monroe's personnel file, once buried in bureaucratic shadows, was dragged into daylight. 7 formal complaints of excessive force. 4 incidents of racial profiling. All previously resolved internally are now under renewed scrutiny. An internal memo from 2019, previously sealed, surfaced, warning of his escalatory behavior in cross-racial civilian encounters. His precinct had looked away for years. Now, the public was staring directly in. By Tuesday morning, Monroe was suspended indefinitely, without pay. A federal inquiry was launched, not just into his conduct, but into the culture of silence that had protected him. Meanwhile, Major General Celina Brooks received an outpouring of support. Veterans, civil rights leaders, and fellow service members flooded social media with messages of solidarity and shame. But Selena didn't retreat behind closed doors. She did not let others speak for her. She went on national television, sitting across from a respected anchor in a studio bathed in neutral light. No uniform, no medals. Just a black blouse, clear eyes, and a message the country wasn't ready to ignore. "I'm not here today as a general," she said. "I'm here as a black woman who was almost shot for shopping." The anchor, visibly moved, remained silent. "I can stand," Selena continued, "because I have a military rank, a public record, and the weight of a nation behind me." She paused, looked into the camera. "But what about those who don't? What about the teenagers in hoodies? The father is walking home from work? The women like me, unarmed, calm, composed, who never get the chance to say their name because someone already decided what they were worth?" Her words didn't end with anger. They ended with a call. This isn't about punishment, it's about accountability, and change only comes when we stop pretending this is rare. She could have sued. The legal teams lined up within days, offering strategies, compensation estimates, and class action potentials. Civil rights attorneys saw an open and shut case. Activists wanted a trial. Headlines begged for a courtroom showdown. But Major General Celina Brooks chose a different battlefield. "This isn't about retribution," she told a quiet crowd at a veterans' town hall. "It's about revelation." She didn't press charges. She didn't demand millions. She didn't weaponize her rank. Instead, she stood in front of schools, in police academies, in front of cameras and behind closed doors, speaking, teaching, unmasking a truth too long ignored, that racism in law enforcement didn't always look like burning crosses or slurs yelled across streets. Sometimes it wore a clean uniform, carried a polished badge, and whispered doubt where there should be trust. Her message was not laced with rage. It carried something heavier, disappointment sharpened by clarity. "If it took my stars to survive that moment," she said in one interview, "then we're failing everyone else who doesn't have them." The story of that day in Maplewood Galleria became more than viral content. It became a case study in academy training manuals, a wake-up call in city councils, a subject in classrooms where future officers were asked not What would you do? But what do you believe? Monroe faded into the shadows of public disgrace, suspended, investigated, exposed. But Selena? She stepped into a brighter light, not for glory, but to ensure others could walk safely in shadows without fear. The final scene of the viral video, played in full at the congressional hearing on police reform, has no audio, just the image. Celina Brooks, in full military uniform, was walking across a gravel path in a quiet army barracks. No entourage. No applause. Her stride is even. Her back was straight. The morning light spilling across her shoulders. And her eyes, not triumphant, not bitter, but steady. Eyes that have seen too much to be naive and yet still choose to believe in better. A woman who could have brought the system to its knees, but chose instead to stand tall so the system might finally learn how to rise. No closing arguments, no vengeance. Just a truth that lingers longer than outrage. The real test of power, she once said, is how you use it when no one expects you to. And as the screen fades to black, the silence that follows isn't empty. It's heavy. It's earned. And it demands that we listen,